Good morning, everyone. We just heard such a beautiful song that connected every one of us in the room, and this topic is so relevant. This topic is so relevant because I do believe that entrepreneurs are, artists who are entrepreneurs who make the world come alive. It can be one song, one music that connects humanity. And today we want to share a little bit about our ideas on how we can help entrepreneurs be more successful. According to the Conference Board of Canada, it's estimated that the annual contribution of art and culture to from the industry is about 7.4% of the GDP, accounting for 1.1 million jobs, and the gross total that is higher than all of the jobs in mining, forestry, fishery sectors, and the Canadian Armed Forces. So I'm going to direct this question to Tara. In your opinion, how do you think entrepreneurs contribute to the socio-economic capital of the world?
So first of all, I'm not even sure how we can top that because I'm tone deaf, so we're not going to be quite as exciting as the wonderful ladies. But I do think that it's really difficult. I think the relationship to monetizing art is difficult because we want that spiritual side of it, right? But I think we have to be able to tell our story well. I think that it's important that, you were citing statistics from Canada, certainly here in India as well, over 1 million people are employed by just the film industry alone, and over 4.5 million if you look at ancillary services. So, even that alone is an incredible economic benefit, and I don't think that we tell our story well enough to whether it's national governments or state governments or municipal governments to say that while this is spiritually uplifting and a creativity that inspires people, it also has an economic benefit to society. And I think that we do ourselves and the art a disservice when we don't tell that story and seek support for not just the inspiration that's provided, but the economic benefit that's provided, if that makes sense. I've worked previously in Canada's northern community where there's flying communities of 500-600 people, and really it's largely the women and their art that are the economic center of those communities. They are cut off, isolated for good portions of the year. There's times when even the planes can't fly in and out, yet the art is what sustains them, but it's the art that also provides economic benefit to those communities. And I think we see those kinds of communities around the world, and certainly here in India.
Very nicely put. And I think one of the greatest wealth that we have in a country like Canada is it represents almost 180 countries, and it's so diverse. I always like to give the example of the James Bond brand. When I say that you can, play the opening tune of James Bond anywhere in the world and people will recognize it. So it's such a great opportunity when you are able to monetize any kind of creative art form, or especially films.
So before I begin, Bernard was asking me, what are you doing in this panel? Being a former investment banker, I said, I'm a Bengali, so creativity and culture is part of our DNA. But what I just wanted to add to what Tara said was I was just doing some research, and I did see the Cultural Times estimates that cultural and creative industries, they generate a revenue of about 2,250 billion and employs 30 million people worldwide, so that's a huge number. And I'm not sure about the India numbers, but I was just, the other important thing which I thought I'd mention is Mumbai just announced a new development plan last week. And in that, there's a boost for the arts and culture quotient, because what they've said is they're going to allow institutional areas or public institutions to carve out 20% of their space for art and culture. So what that means is that number of art galleries, museums, and music schools hopefully will see the light of day. I just thought I'd add that.
Thank you, Ron, too. My next question is to Your Excellency. You've traveled and lived in different parts of the world, and this is your second time coming back to be able to work in India. And my question is, our creative industries with the arts and cultural sector at its innershore could be an ideal gateway to a long-term strategy improving our competitiveness and our capacity for innovation. How can creative entrepreneurs lead a more certain, sustainable future global economy?
Okay, Thank you, Anu. That's a really, really big question, so I'll try to dissect it and answer at least parts of it. First of all, it's wonderful to be on this panel and wonderful to be invited to this conference. And I think just touching on what Tara has said and also trying to make it real for this audience, one of the great things about art, when you talk about art and when you talk about commercializing art, is that art in and of itself, art and culture, is how we tell our stories, how individuals get out. It allows us to have a window into a different kind of world, different kind of culture, and hopefully it'll bring people together. And particularly when we're dealing with groups that have been traditionally marginalized or have not had the same voice in a society, it's much easier to do that through representations, whether it's through film, writing, poetry, or visual arts. And this is why we want to make sure that government is involved in supporting different voices, unheard voices, and make sure that they get the platform that they need and to make it a much more inclusive society. Art and culture have the role that it plays in terms of the social impact is critical to a vibrant economy and society. When we think about, we've talked about some of the numbers, and I think it was in 2014, 55 billion of Canada's GDP was attributed to the cultural industry. Figures state something like 600,000 jobs, but it goes all the way up to 1 million when you think about all of the indirect benefits. So it's not just about the content provider who is telling us their story and asking the consumer to listen, but by the time it gets to the consumer, you're really looking like a chain of people who are involved. And those people often do not get the attention that they deserve, but when you think about the producers, the retailers, the publicists, the printers, it is an entire industry that is really hard to somewhat understand, but it is very critical for us as people, as a community, to find those commonalities and make sure that everybody is included in that.
Thank you. Shika, you've been involved in helping me with the exhibition that we did last year between Canada and India, where we celebrated the 150 years of Canada and the 70 years of India with a moving mural. And you work in the area of empowering people and life coaching and mentoring. Tell us, why do you think it's important for us to cultivate the cultural and community capital at grassroots levels, especially for the youth and students?
Thank you, Anu, and it was such a pleasure working on that particular project. So I also volunteer have been volunteering for the past 25 years with a Buddhist NGO. And this is sort of spread across 192 countries with almost 16 million people. And half of it is youth. And we found that the biggest connector between human beings, and you just saw it in the USA panel when you stood up to sing that song, that beautiful song, everybody sort of connected instantly. And when you form connections like that, especially when you're at a younger level, there's tremendous amount of creativity and productivity that comes forth. There is trust that and there is collaboration that can happen. So all these wonderful qualities come to light. And if you look at, like, we've had boys and girls, arts exhibition. We've used art as a means to connect between two countries, children in one country painting, children in another country painting on the similar subject and exchanging those paintings. And, therefore forming connects or, with each other. They may not know who they are, but they all speak a common language. And I feel the whole world can be actually transformed when this common language of love and understanding is built. At the base of it, everybody is the same. And then the other thing that art really impacts is, I feel art, like one is the direct way that it can impact in terms of economics, the the money aspect of art. But art is also like, it's, I would say, like a love economy because so much of what we do actually it actually gets done because of the love of another person behind. And when people are connected through art, and when young children are connected to art and youth are connected to art, they can really form those base connections through which they can transform the world. So I really felt, this is one beautiful way to connect. And it could be, painting, it could be music, it could be the films. People resonate. You may not know the language, but you resonate with the same feelings. So I feel it's a very essential component of any, but the governments should really look at it very seriously, especially with the kind of conflicts that are going on, the kind of, proliferation of nuclear weapons which is happening. So we really need to have a kind of a common human connect. And it pays to be good, and it pays to have this kind of a connect. So thank you.
I just wanted to add to that as well, because I think it's so true that perhaps governments and perhaps businesses devalue that connect, right? And I think that, again, we have to tell that story, because not only are those connections important from the space of socio well-being, society's well-being, but they're also valuable in any organization that we're in, right? And you see more and more this kind of technocratic society, but perhaps people aren't valuing that kind of education or that kind of spirit or that kind of insight in employees, in people, and in young children, the funding for the arts is declining, whether it's in schools or social or community programs, and I think it's really important that we inculcate that, because if we don't inculcate that, we're going to turn into a society where we're not able to bring that to the workplace or bring that to these different, the educational institution we're in or whatever, and it's bereft because of it. And I think that, here in India, I always think a good example is the first female leader of the State Bank of India, studied English literature in university, right? So she wasn't bringing numbers to the table. She was bringing a creativity and a connection. And in fact, many of the programs that she instituted at the State Bank of India helped it develop precisely because they were sort of outside of the box. And she was nurturing women and allowing them to, for example, solving their problems by being able to go to communities and work in communities where previously they weren't able to, and get the experience they needed to grow into in the bank. So that's a very corporate example, but I think if we don't have that, we're not going to be able to and value somebody with a literature degree or somebody with a music degree coming out of university, or provide funding for that at the lower levels. Then we're not going to raise children or raise citizens that can provide that to, whether it's to society, to an institution, or to a business.
Thank you, Tara. And very rightly put, because MIT and Harvard recognize now that anyone coming into a program, they'd really like to know more about their artistic skills as well. And it helps to balance right brain, left brain. My next question is to Rontu, who's done a lot of pioneering work in the educational field. He travels between Canada and India, and he's been very instrumental in doing work with the Scheurwater School of Business. And my question to you, continuing on the education part of it, how can we prepare to fully harness the importance of creativity in education and skill development to maximize the full creative potential, to ensure an innovative future and national well-being based on both a traditional and digitally based education system?
Wow, that's a long question. But the way I'd like to respond to that is that, taking the Indian example, we've all brought up on rote learning, and that's beginning to change in India, and a lot of good liberal arts schools which have begun to emerge in India. One very close down the road called Ashoka University, and one near Pune called Flame. And I think what it does is that it sort of fosters intellectual curiosity, analytical thinking, and awareness of the socio-cultural environment, which is so important and which was so lacking in our past experiences in India. And just going by my own example of my two daughters who studied liberal arts in the US, it gives you a very solid foundation, and it allows you to mix and max your mix your majors and minors, and you can do arts with economics, and these are sort of options which were never available in India, and that's beginning to come into play, which I think is excellent for Indian youth, because it will give them a broader base from which they can narrow down into the specializations that they want. And I think that's just talking about the undergraduate or the graduate space, as you call here. But even if you look at North America, if you look at Schulich, there is a ranking called the Better World MBA ranking, which basically ranks MBAs in terms of how they integrate social, ethical, and environmental impact management issues into the MBA programs. And that's again something which is extremely important. And there's also a Center of Excellence for Responsible Business, which basically emphasizes the bottom line thinking, which is again not just talking about profits but planet and people. And I think those are sort of important lessons that we can learn from Canada and North America and implement them in India for us to become a more society, more caring society. That's my view.
I guess I'll just add on to that. I fully agree with everything that has just been stated. And I also think in Canada we're also trying to move away more from driving children into certain professions. As kids grow up, we as parents, we ask them, what do you want to be? And we hope that they're going to say something like doctor, lawyer, but that's often not the case. But I think that when you really look at people who are successful, people who are happy, and a lot of them have a creative component to it, it means that they've developed skills that have more to do with how to solve problems, how to communicate effectively, how to adapt to different situations, how to work in a cross-disciplinary type of environment. And so just going back to the topic of why we're here today, when you look at my previous comment and what it really takes to make sure that we can get art out to as many people as possible, or culture out to as many people as possible, somebody who is just creative and knows how to draw is not going to be as successful as somebody who can communicate with a whole group of technologists, business people, bankers, to be able to explain why they were inspired to produce whatever they did and how they're going to do that. Just as we have, and I'll bring it down to women, is that when you hear another woman tell her story about what has happened to her, how she succeeded, it will resonate more with other women because they can see themselves in that person's shoes. And I think that's why we want to make sure that when we are thinking about how to educate our children, how to promote certain kinds of types of education, the more that we can encourage self-confidence and look more to competencies rather than knowledge, which anyone can acquire at any time through reading the internet, then that will have much more understanding globally, locally, and internationally.
Very nicely put. And I want to just add to it, being an entrepreneur myself, when you first create, I'm a visual artist, I paint, it's always for my soul expansion or my soul expression. But then if you don't have the combination of right brain, left brain, the business mind to be able to take it forward, it's very difficult to get lost in the mix and not be able to showcase your work. And therefore, I always encourage people to be able to use a mentor or someone from a business background to be able to help and guide them. And today we have the internet and so many options to be able to showcase, because expression, human expression, is not just something that allows for social social currency to build, but also expands for connecting people across the world. It can be one song or one film, like I said before, and who doesn't know the James Bond riff? You can go to 180 countries and play it, and people will know it. It's a 60-year-old brand, and it's still making a lot of money. So there's a lot of opportunity for connecting human minds, but also for making money. And on that topic, I want to ask this question to Ms. Park and Tara, and anyone else who wants to add. Why is it vital for public and private investment in these industries to uplift our creative and cultural ecosystem?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So let me just go a step back in saying that, Canada and India have had such a great relationship, especially with regards to art and culture. We were at the Key Frames last year as the partner country at IFFI in November of last year, and there's been so much good work that's been going on, and I'm really proud to be able to share that with India and Canada. So there's been great movement in this respect. So my question is, because we've done so much of investment, and why is it vital for public and private investment in these industries to uplift the creative and cultural ecosystems globally?
So I think it is important that we have a mix of both public and private. Just looking, it's very interesting to me because I work, as you said, between both industries, industry in India and industry in Canada. And in Canada, our arts section is largely publicly funded. So the creative industries, a little bit less so on the music and publishing side, but even there's a number of grants that you can get. And these are arm's length from government. So it's got nothing to do with government looking for content or policing content or asking for content that uplifts the center, but really more about just throwing funds out there to be able to promote raw creativity and allowing artists to grow. And I think that's really important, and I found it quite different when I came here to India, where 100% of the film industry, for example, is privately funded, where in Canada you could make a feature-length film that's entirely publicly funded. So it's really the exact opposite. A lot of the grants are coming from the major companies, which is great. I mean, we're sitting here in a Taj Hotel, and of course Tata gives a lot of money to the arts, but you have this idea that it's requirement of the private realm to fund, which is, we want that in Canada. So it's kind of this, each India and Canada are each a dichotomy, either sides of the spectrum, and I think there's probably a healthy balance somewhere in the middle where we can have private industries understanding the value of funding this kind of art, and making sure that they give back to the community and back to society through engaging through art. And I think that on the other side, we need to make sure that there's publicly available funding that's not tied to a corporate agenda, that supports the arts and this idea of the common good. And if you think, in my view, and I'm, as Anu said, I'm sort of more on the business side, but it strikes me that you can't be an artist without having empathy. I've never met an artist that is not empathetic, because as they sing that song, they're empathizing with the feelings of the song and the feelings of the composer, or they're painting that painting and they're trying to express themselves so that people can see that. And I think this idea of empathy, of filmmakers, you see it all the time. Of course they have to empathize with their subject, even when it's sometimes an appalling subject. You see actors, having to portray characters, but they're able to get inside of their head. And I think right now in this world, we could use a little more empathy. And it's only through that we're going to be able to connect one with another. And so that's why I think on both sides, we need that public funding for the arts so that people can move forward without being, again, tied to a corporate agenda. But at the same time, we need corporations to understand the value of it and the value of inculcating and nurturing empathy throughout our society.
I was just going to highlight onto what Tara just said, because I think it's a really important point, is that when you look at public and private, there's slightly different roles. And in terms of the common good, Government has, I think, a stronger role to play in that regard. And when you think about creative industries, one of the tenets of that is that you're representing something, and that most likely all stories should be valid. So we can't predict which stories should be commercialized or commercially successful versus others. So part of that common good is making sure that all stories get some airplay, because that is how we affect some kind of social change as we move forward.
I'd just like to add that investment by the government in this field improves national productivity, because it essentially helps creative industries grow, critical thinking, and I would say that it widens your intellectual ability, and all that in aggregate makes the nation a better skilled workforce, which ultimately contributes to productivity.
Thank you. I do believe that every single one of us is an artist. We all painted and we all sang and danced when we were in school. And that's a very integral part of us that we should carry forward as we go through life. And as Shara mentioned earlier, you know, every time an artist creates, it's an opportunity for expression, for change, for disruption, for taking forward an opinion of whatever is important to you. And every single one of us, 7 billion of us, can make that change happen, can make that connection happen, whether it's Gangnam Style or The Sound of Music or We Are the World. You know, every time you tell your story through creative process, we're making a change in the environment, and we're bringing people together. So thank you, Tara, thank you, Shikha, thank you, Ms. Park, and thank you, Ronju, for being here. And thanks to all of you for being here with us this morning and helping us, sharing ideas with us.
Thank you so much.
But we won't be closing with a song.
Thank you so much to you, Anu, for moderating this wonderful panel. I just want to close with a very short, brief sharing that we held in November last year, the Regional Women Economic Forum, British Columbia in Vancouver, in association with the Vancouver International South Asian Film Festival, which has been curated for the past 7 years by a lady who's actually our MC, who you know you very well, she was also an actor and a policewoman from Canada. Her name is Manu Sandhu. She's right now shooting for a movie. And it was a beautiful, beautiful, you know, coming together of women, of entrepreneurs, and this whole sensibility which was creative coming from the city. And it was a great, great experience. We are hoping to repeat it. And Honorable Prime Minister Trudeau had sent a wonderful message for it as well. And he was delighted that there was this coming together of the forum and the film festival. So doing our little bit every day to make this world a more integrated, seamless space where there are no silos of arts or sciences or engineering, like you mentioned, MIT and Harvard, where at MIT now 25% of the courses, when you want to become an engineer, 25% of the courses have to be in the arts, because that's very essential for the holistic development of the brain and the thinking and the true development of a leader who's going to impact society. So thank you very much for completing that circle for us, and I'm so happy your session was prefaced by a beautiful, soulful song. Could have been better. Thank you.